Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This week's episode of Dive Into Your Mind with Helen and Toni is about being addicted to the payoff. We are both very familiar with this concept and have really dug into it within our own practices in different ways. And we're excited to share a little bit about that today and kind of get into a back and forth and chat about how that we are really addicted to this payoff that comes from on one level not being aware, but on maybe on the other side of the coin is not wanting to do the work that comes with being aware and bringing about change, which brings about joy and happiness and all of those things, and many other things in the puzzle. So my name is Toni Short. I'd love to introduce my amazing friend Helen, and tell us a little bit about yourself for anyone that's new to our little chats, how we kind of got here, and background to our journeys. Go for it.
So Toni and I have known each other for 15 years, and throughout that time it started as being housemates, and then somewhere along the line it transformed into being each other's cheerleaders and, really looking into whatever was holding us back and stopping us from living the life that we wanted to live. I think we both saw greatness in each other that neither could see.
Yes.
And it was the, hello, what are you doing?
Wake up call.
I'm calling you out on your payoff story.
Yes.
Um, and then I think since then we've both gone on a learning journey, and we want to share this with you because we want you to learn the quickest possible way.
Yes. Yes. And I think while there is no silver bullet, I heard that phrase recently from a good friend, there is also awareness, and awareness comes in what we're exposed to, expansion and in learning from other people, and also then kind of applying all of that in the right timing of our own journey in our own life. And I think that Helen and I come from two very different sort of sides of the coin, which is what I love the most about our friendship and also our interactions when it comes to sort of spirituality and consciousness. We both have very different approaches, very different thought processes, and very different perceptions of ourselves within that journey. And I think the frankness the and really the joy that has come from being so brutally honest with each other, that there's no sting, but there's such incredible payoffs in a positive way, because we're able to really push forward in our own journeys, because we don't mince around with why things are. And I think we're so deeply interested in learning about ourselves and digging deeper and deeper and deeper, and then every time we reveal something to each other, it's kind of revealing it to ourselves as well. And sometimes it's safer almost to go to someone else than to ourselves, and then it's only later that we're like, oh wow, I didn't see that, or something like that. So I thank you for always being brutally honest and bringing such humor also too, because I think some of this stuff can get really heavy, but when you really look at it, nothing is that deep. Nothing can actually even hurt us anymore, because we've been through so much in so many different ways. And it's only when we allow maybe the story of things to carry the weight and wield the power that we can get sort of weighed down and feel heavy from it, when actually you realize that these are things that are happening to me, these are things I've been through, but it doesn't own me, it doesn't have power. And all of a sudden we can kind of see light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful payback story, because I know so many people who go around avoiding the work because they believe it's going to lead to some sort of a crisis. It's going to be really painful. And what we forget is that it can be a whole lot of fun,
Yeah.
because once you remove yourself from it and you kind of look at it and kind of go, wow, did I really, was I really doing that?
Yeah.
Did I really think that? Did I really get so engrossed and emotionally enmeshed in how difficult it was going to be? It's almost like you have all these vines, attached to your limbs, and you're struggling and they keep holding you down. This is the vision that I get with some people, because they're just so engulfed in the grief that's going to be unraveled, and you're like, okay, It really,
And I mean, there's no judgment in any of that on anyone, because we work with clients in different ways. And also, but there is something so freeing from the truth. I think that it's almost that vision I got was that it was a pair of scissors or a couple of like hacksaws right next to everywhere in the vine. Yet somebody's just like, I can't, I won't. Yeah. And you're like, but pick them up. You can cut them up. I'm like, I can't, I have to go through this. It's like really, like, it becomes really comical. And I think we might have covered this last time, but one of the most amazing books that really, I think, for both of us was a huge shift was Michael Singer's Untethered Soul. And that moment when, he talked about there's kind of a thorn in the arm, and then, you don't want to pick it out because it's going to hurt. And then you, so you put a band-aid over it, and then the next day it gets a bit infected. So you put some like, ointment on it. And then the next minute there's sort of like a sling. And then the next minute, you've got a cage, and the next minute you're in a wheelchair with a cage. And I mean, it can go to such extremes. And I really think if you can find the comedy or the humor in, like you say, extracting yourself and kind of looking at it from a different view, you're like, really, you were literally just like at the end of your world
yeah,
over something that like in 5 years time is not going to make any difference. You won't even remember.
yeah. It's like the story about doing the work is far more laborious, painful, and lengthy in terms of time than actually doing the work.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, because there are super effective ways to kind of get change, and it's about educating yourself about what they are. But
Yes.
the whole process of, do I, don't I, it's going to cost this much, and what if it doesn't work, and what if I need 20 sessions, and like over a lifetime, you just kind of go, just do the work any which way you can. If you
Yeah.
can afford to pay for it, because
Yeah.
it's going to get you a quicker result. And
Yeah.
just be open, just be really, really open to it.
Yeah. And starting somewhere, I think for me, you know, when I put the camp on earlier this year, one of the prefaces for me was spirituality is free. Really the concept of spirituality, same as the concept of working out. You could like work out against your own body weight for free and have a, fairly decent body. You could walk, run, push-ups and all the rest of it. So I feel like if we all tuned into ourselves, and this is not like you all need to do this, it's more of like there is an invitation for us all to tune in and therefore kind of follow these guidelines. And then with all of the information out there in the world, find what resonates. You don't need to go to a $1 million person or have 20,000 therapy sessions. It's partly just having I don't know if it's desire, but like a drive inside of you that you want things to be different. And I don't know, that maybe that fire in everybody is different, but like I just know I couldn't live like I was living anymore. And that was, in a business context as well as personal relationships. We'll jump into that as we talk about the addictions that both of us were running. And I think there's something really beautiful in actually just almost like doing it for yourself. The simplicity of saying, I'm willing and open to look at everything. I've been told that I'm sort of addicted to vulnerability and that I'm addicted to sort of change and growth, because like, I just want, like, why, for me, I'm like, why wouldn't I want to look at something that makes me feel unhappy or not right and shift it? And so therefore every day I'm, sometimes almost looking for that. You have to be conscious of that too, to make sure you're not trying to like turn something into something like, can I
Like,
fix?
I can't enjoy the moment because I'm looking for something that I want to grow from.
Yeah, or like, oh, maybe this is, I'm not doing something right or whatever. We can all sometimes look at the other side of it where we're like, this is, I'm not, maybe this was just what was meant to happen, so that you could see actually that you've done really well, or you've come really far, or do you know more than you think you do. I think there's many, the universe, God, angels, guides, whoever you talk to, they're funny buggers. They put very amusing things in our path to help us along this journey. And I think when you add that sense of humor and comedy, it can be quite a ride. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Completely,
Yeah.
completely. They all have a very wicked sense of humor.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so let's jump in. Last week we talked about language and how important that was. And I think, as we go through, even again, helping ourselves, that can be just, once you're aware of that, you can be looking, if every time someone, you know, and this might even lead into being addicted to the payoff. You know, if someone calls you every morning, how are you? Well, I'm all right. And then this happened and this happened. Like there's something in there that is getting, it's filling a spot, or it's, you know, rubbing an itch, let's say, in responding that way. Maybe then that they say, oh, everything's gonna be fine, or they might kind of act in a way that is maybe touching something from childhood that you didn't get, some sort of support, some sort of love, some sort of like attention. And I think, you know, we see it in children very well. And I think the unconscious behaviors sometimes that we run as in our adult life are very much, you know, driven from the childhood kind of elements. So why don't you jump into the cerebral side of things, the bit that I love about you? Like tell us a little bit about the like science and the and history and all of these things of like how addictions and payoffs kind of what is it doing on a like paperwork sense, let's say that.
So in terms of, so when we come onto the planet, we need to be in a community to survive.
Okay.
So our primary motivator is to connect,
Okay.
and we're always looking for ways to connect. And ways to connect are to be the carer, so therefore you nurture everyone.
Okay.
If you know somebody who's a martyr in that life.
Can you be all of these? Is there any rules against that?
No, you can definitely be more than one of these.
Okay,
So you can be a combination of all. It depends on. But I invite everyone to just reflect on who was what in their family. So
yes,
you
very
can be
true.
the carer, you can be the sick one. So
Mm-hmm.
normally the sick one always gets looked after; they don't get left behind
Mm-hmm.
uh, as a human being. But as an animal, you would be outcast. But you
Right.
know, humans are sentient beings. Then there's the brilliant one, so the
Mm-hmm.
one who can just do absolutely everything. And then you have the difficult one.
Mm.
So the one who's always going to throw a tantrum. And I know that last week we spoke about middle-aged people still throwing tantrums in the workplace to get their way. And
Yes.
that's definitely like a learned behavior. And a lot of the times it's a combination between being both brilliant and difficult
Yes.
that people make their ways up to the top of the chain or in senior
Mm.
positions.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, maybe we'll leave that one there. That's like a whole a whole like the workplace, um you know, like energy, corporate fear and the energy in a workplace is a whole like series on its own. And I think that you and I have a lot to say about that. So I'm putting that on the parking pin board for next time. Go on.
Um, so they're pretty much the four ways to connect and to belong. And we all get payoffs from each of these.
Okay.
So when you're growing up being the brilliant one, you always find that you need to be performing and achieving to get acknowledged. And that could lead you in being an overachiever who is then stressed out, tired, burnt out. But the payoff is that you're getting the attention
Mm,
because you're the brilliant one.
interesting.
Yeah. And then in terms of being the sick one, so physically you could be sick, but then you could also, let's just say emotionally or mentally have these dramas, trials, or tribulation as a way
Mhm.
of getting attention.
Okay.
So, and we do. If you were to look around at everyone who was in your life, maybe in the last 10 years, for those people who have started to do the work, you're going to find that you generally gravitate away from those people.
Mhm.
But sometimes those people are in your family and you can't actually get away from them. So how is it that you navigate that conversation to break away from the, oh, poor me story?
Mm,
Poor me is getting your attention. It's just that you
mhm.
don't know how to get attention any other way.
Right.
So you're going to default to the attention you know that is guaranteed.
Yes. Yeah, I feel that. Okay. So let's, you want to jump into us? Like, is there more you want to hit on the, let's get into the shit.
Hmm. I think practical examples. So,
Yeah.
how do you know where your payback story is?
Okay.
I would get you to think about your childhood and think about who you want to get revenge on
Okay.
or where you resent somebody,
Okay.
because that's going to drive particular behavior. And I
Okay.
can give you an example that I experienced in one of the classes that I did. So there's a very successful woman. She's in her early 30s, has a career going, attractive, single. So her singleness had everything to do with her parents being incredibly strict on her upbringing and making her behave in a proper manner so that everybody in their community thought that she was amazing. And she was getting payback on her parents by being single because everyone's going, well, why is their daughter the only one who's not married or in a relationship?
Wow.
Yeah. So this is how subtle it can be.
I mean, that
It's
doesn't sound subtle. That sounds a big. Is she doing that consciously? Or
unconscious.
so so for example, the woman is, potentially pushing partners away and causing conflicts within the partnerships because that's what help feeds the other side of it.
Right, because that inner child didn't get time to play when it was growing up.
Right.
And the inner child has resentment against the parents for not being allowed to play. So this is where,
I'm like,
add that too. Everything's in layers, and for some
yeah,
people, it's a really simple chunk or slab that can get removed and the problem's resolved. For other people, it's intertwined, it's meshed.
right,
If you grew up with a slightly confusing childhood, there's going to be many different layers and aspects to
right.
what your payoffs are.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. I've never thought about it like that before. And I look at myself and I'm like, was that what I was doing to sort of, going through all these wild trials and tribulations? Was that what I was doing to sort of get back in a way of like, you never paid attention to me, so now I'm going to make you because I went through all these crazy things.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So if you didn't get attention as a child, chances are you're going to be very attention seeking to drive that behavior from anyone who's around you.
Right. Right. Oh, that's interesting. Sore spot. Okay, changing gears back to you then, so we can take the pressure off me. No, I'm just kidding. Why don't you tell us about a few or any of yours that you want to talk about?
Yeah, mine would be weight. It just kind of yo-yos and it fluctuates. I feel like I've had this lifelong, 5 to 10 kilos that I've been losing over the period of like 20
Mm-hmm.
years.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from, well, if I'm carrying a bit of weight, then I won't get as much attention. So I don't have to deal with the attention that I do get.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the payback of carrying more weight. It's like I don't have to have the attention. But then when you start looking at yourself in the mirror and you start kind of going, oh, wow, I really need to do something. Or when family members just does comment on your weight,
Or something. Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're like, oh, it might just be easy for me to shed some weight. But then I had a client who it was payback for her to keep the weight on so that she could be acknowledged as being intelligent because she had quite a voluptuous figure, large breasts, and a lot of the time she was criticized growing up saying that they're only telling you that you're smart because of the way that you look.
Look.
So therefore she was carrying weight to as the payoff for the payback.
Mm.
So when we say payoff or payback, it's like you're almost doing something because there's a secondary gain to it.
Yes.
And if you have a lifelong, I need to lose weight, and let's just say you're overweight, I need to lose 20 kilos, that's going to be your number one priority. And if you never take action against it, it means that you're pushing back all the other things that come after it.
Mm.
So if the second in line is getting in a relationship, or it's traveling the world, and you're really scared about traveling the world, or it's about writing a book, you're like, hang on, I don't have time to write a book because I have to drop this weight.
Right.
Yeah, so the payback or the secondary gain is that you're pushing out all your other goals that are coming along.
Interesting. So to put the spotlight back on you, did
Right.
did Did you feel like you could hide your brilliance through the weight? Because you've always been smarter than the average bear and always been coming at things from a very intelligent place and thinking process and understanding. Was that part of it for you?
The, the weight piece for me was, if I, one, I was very shy
Okay.
growing up. So the weight piece for me was, if I have excess weight, I don't have to deal with men approaching me. So
Okay.
therefore, I don't have to deal with the shyness. Um, Sometimes at work, was it really a problem? I mean, when you get looked up and down, it's not the nicest thing. Um, Maybe there was a subliminal. I
Mm.
think the glasses for me, definitely, there's a
Mm.
payoff to having glasses.
Like almost a shield between.
Shields,
Yeah.
hide behind them.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are some people who, once they go through therapy, they do lose their glasses.
Yeah.
I mean, my eyesight's actually improving, which is quite funny.
Yeah. It's interesting.
When it should be, the reverse, it should be getting worse.
Yeah.
But it's actually improving.
Well, I feel
Um,
like when you're in alignment with yourself, everything improves: your skin, your hair, your nails, you look younger. It's like Benjamin Button. I mean, I don't know if anyone else has cottoned on to it, but it's genuinely a thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You're releasing all that, I guess maybe energetic toxicity.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that we kind of keep on ourselves. I think it's been interesting too, as you've um let's say connected more with your feminine energy as you've been working through this. I think, if we kind of sidebar for a second, both of us have very much lived from our masculine energy, and certainly in our work context, we resided there because it felt, and correct me if any of the language is not, accurate for you, it felt like we could be more effective or um, more taken notice of in a more convincing way, or it felt like from a societal point of view that's how we had to behave in order to get results, especially because we were results driven, and or we were judging ourselves if we weren't effective as a leader, as a boss, then we weren't good, and all of those things. So for me, it's been really beautiful watching you as you have worked through your own stuff, like finding that feminine energy but still keeping your I don't know if it's like the brainy and the beauty, like even just looking at you now, like you're so beautiful and you're so um
Well, thanks.
yeah, like there's an element of being really put together and really like smart, but at the same time, like there's a warmness and a softness to you that I believe has really shifted how you also interact in the world, and also the things that come from us. So that but that takes courage to allow someone to see you behind the glasses, and to see you even behind the lipstick and behind the clothes and behind the outfits and the way we walk and the way we hold ourselves and all of those things. Can you reflect on that a little bit in your journey?
Yeah, definitely. Um, for me, time, everyone has their own experience of time.
Hmm.
And you'll find that there are quick talkers, slow talkers, quick thinkers, slow thinkers. Sometimes people process information in a way where they need to digest it in their body. And I was always, my driver was, there's a lot of work to do. It's going to take me 3 months. I had like a rolling 3-month list of things that I had to do, which I could never get to the bottom of.
Okay.
So I was like day in, day out, show up fast, quick, show up fast, quick.
Hmm.
And people around me had other job responsibilities that didn't require that mindset. So when I was in a meeting, if somebody scheduled an hour and I could get it done in 30 minutes, I was pushing, driving that agenda, being timekeeper, um,
How did
which,
that go down? Like, did that work sometimes, and others people were like um resistant to it? Did
definitely people were resistant to it. But
And did you
when
see that at the time? Were you aware? I mean, and I know you've gone through journeys of awareness within your work context, but like, at what point did you feel it, or did you see it, or did you know it?
I, it went through different phases of, am I on the same level with this person?
Okay.
Or am I above this person?
Yeah.
So when I was on the
And
same
above
level,
them, how?
in terms of just responsibility,
Okay.
like managerial,
Like hierarchy.
yeah, hierarchy.
Got it.
So if there was somebody who was notorious, who was higher up the hierarchy, I would begin the meeting with, "Can I be timekeeper? And is it okay if I interrupt you when the point is made?"
Wow. That's gangster.
But when you're across
I
that
mean,
many,
and don't take that like, I think this is a beautiful moment, and I'm jumping in a lot here because I think this dialogue and this back and forth for me, and I'm trusting for everyone else, is really because we're breaking down the nuances of it. Because your first reaction was then like, but as in that was a bad thing. I mean, it may have been if you had to come across like a douche, but on the whole, like that could be, it's almost like, I had a friend once that talked to me that was in the military and loved this way of working, because it was really like, we come to the table, what's the issue? Who's got the rank? Who's got the best idea? Throw in your ideas. No, I'm going to go with this. Let's do it. Move on. There's no like emotion. There's no bullshit. There's no fighting. There's no like, my feelings are hurt. I thought my idea was great. So it's kind of interesting, like how you came at it in that way.
yeah, and I'd always be like, "Look, we've got 15 minutes left to go. Have we covered off all the major points?" And
Yeah.
then it's also about, sometimes when you have 5 or 6 people in a meeting, nobody's taking action points, nobody's holding anybody accountable. I mean, if I went and, as I progressed up, if I knew that I was running the meeting and I needed more time, I needed more time in my day, I would ask them, "Can you fit this into 45 minutes for me?" And if they went, and let's just say they went an hour 15 or an hour and a half for a 1 hour meeting, they certainly wouldn't do that the next time, because I'd just cut them off and go, "Okay, next."
Right.
Um, some people like the sound of their own voices, and if you're repetitive and you can't articulate what it is that the other person needs to make a decision succinctly, like know your audience, know what they need to hear,
Right.
save them time, and they are going to be somebody who you are going to want to speak with again.
Right.
But so I would actively avoid the talkers, and I would give more time to the people who were effective and efficient as a way of reward.
Right.
And then you find that the talkers would change the way that they operate. They'd be like, "Okay, this is how I get attention."
Interesting. So many things in that. I think, was there a, let's just like kind of go to the top level. What was there a payoff for you in that behavior? With no judgment that was good, bad, wrong, right, anything, but was there a sort of addiction to sort of like being that, I don't want to say like ball buster, direct gangster, all of those things again with no judgment.
The payback was, for me, it was an element of I'm being productive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I am giving people an even playing field.
Okay.
So it wasn't directed at one person, it was across the board. And then the other payback was, if I'm productive, I'll get promoted.
Okay.
Like there was an element of, this is going to, if I run a tight ship, I'm going to be able to deliver, and that's going to get acknowledged, and then I'm going to either get a promotion or a pay rise of some
Okay.
sort.
Okay. And did those things did it prove more times than not that was working, or that was a good way to do things, or you were making effective change within the people that talkers stopped talking? Did those things kind of come about?
Yeah, they did. I mean, I, everyone who I did cut off, always, when we moved into different companies or roles, they would always say, they would always say, "Thank you. However, we wanted to kill you most of the time." And I was
Yeah.
like, well, my role is to nurture and grow people, and
Right.
nobody's calling them out on behavior that's holding them back. It's like, you know, if you report through to a CEO normally's only got 15 minutes or 30 minutes for you.
Yeah.
And if you talk about 30 minutes on one point, I'm sorry, he's not going to extend his meeting for you. He's going to go next.
Yeah.
Like this is what people don't understand. It's like the higher up the chain you go, the more thankless it is, and the more direct and less emotional it is. And if that's what you want, like, then work on your emotions and work on yourself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's maybe an interesting conversation to add to the board as well, of like, does it need to be that way within business? Because not to say that that CEO being, you know, direct and succinct is remorseful, or not the word, ruthless in a way that, you know, that doesn't have any emotional intelligence or sort of understanding in it. But I think that that's kind of an interesting concept. Okay, so going back,
I want to know what your payoff is.
Okay, I'm happy to change. Yeah.
Yeah. Go tell me what your payoff is.
Okay, so we can hit my. I think it's good because mine's on the relationship side. I think I have many stories on the business side, but they kind of overlap in a way. I think looking back, I think my payoff was I was in a relationship with someone that said they didn't want to be in a relationship. I could not accept that and continued in that relationship. Then it was sort of in a, you know, in a way, in a secret fashion. In a sense, it was you know, very much like private. We didn't go out into public. Most of the sort of relationship happened within my home. And I think I felt special because I felt like it was so special that it was private, and that we were doing you know, great things in keeping it private. um and then I think, you know, I'm a little bit speaking with an older narrator here of like learning what would happen. You know, what I did come to learn, it was, you know, in a narcissistic sort of environment where there was a lot of manipulation. So a lot of the time it was sort of like we were together, we were not together. And that person would sort of come back around and use a lot of the arguments or the fights against me to sort of keep feeding their needs. And I think so the payoff for me was feeling special. I think I wanted to be part of someone's life so deeply at the expense of myself. I think I wanted to be part of someone's life that was sort of, let's say, famous, or you know, kind of in a certain place of status or something. And I think that made me feel good, that like I was special because I was part of that. And I, if I reflect a lot if I reflect back a lot of my relationships since I was younger, they were often with models or footballers or someone that had status according to me. So then I felt more worthy and more valuable because I was with someone.
Did you feel like you were being seen? So when you were dating these, you know, these footballers and models, was there an element of I'm now being seen versus?
I mean, in hindsight, absolutely not. I think that's always what I was searching for. And why they were, I mean, and this maybe is just like a huge generalization, like why they were with me, I'm not really sure. But I never really felt, you know, like I think they were all great
Because
things.
you're like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those plus some, but more of like I think the things that I thought I was bringing and that I thought I was giving to them or bringing to their life weren't really ever seen and justified and not justified and valued. Therefore, it just fed for me the payoff of wanting that more, because when someone that was that did see it, then I would be of value.
Right. Okay.
So what tell me more what you think. I'm ready to be.
I mean, I know we briefly touched on this before. It's almost like when you think you've reached the destination, and
Mm-hmm.
then you take your foot off the pedal and you go, okay, there's no more work for me to do in this area, or the type of work's going to change.
Yes.
The element of, I'm going to call it fake settling,
Yes.
settling for the fake, thinking that it's the real.
Yep.
Um, and maybe that's the payback of kind of going, well, I don't have to do the work anymore. But I
Mm.
think you and I both know that that's really when the work begins.
Yeah. I mean, I think, wow, that just came to me that I, yes, I did really think that I was, I don't know, spiritually advanced, or I'm laughing at myself in all of this. I did think that I was elevated in a way. I thought we were having an elevated relationship. I thought we were having elevated conversations. And whilst I think there were elements that were, and that was also for me the very initial learnings for me around spirituality and awareness and consciousness and all of those kind of things, and even astrology, like many, many things across the board. I do remember saying at one point to some people, in different walks of life, that I was like, if you keep accepting shit dudes, the universe will keep sending you shit dudes. But I really felt like I had stood up to the universe and was not accepting a shit dude. And in hindsight, I was very much in the thick. And so that really was where, everything kind of broke, the camel that broke the straw's back. And that's where the real work for me became, when I actually looked at how, um, I think, even as I dig a little deeper, if you don't mind, as I think about, I would use money. I've always had money. I've always been highly abundant with money. And therefore, I attracted someone that wasn't. And so then I could use that as a way to try and keep him.
Mhm.
And, whilst that felt kind of, if I go back to the nurturer, the martyr, all of those, that's why I feel like there was a couple of in those, because it was like, well, I have this, so it's my responsibility to do this. So that was kind of nurturing, but it was also very martyrous, as in it wasn't my responsibility to do that, but I didn't have the understanding or the knowledge or the courage to stand up for myself. And that probably happened in stages as well. Um, so I very much operated from the payoff that if I did this, then he would love me, or has to love me, because that's what you do, and
Mhm.
or he won't leave. And therefore, if I keep doing this, or if I use it maybe as an example of a learning together, that like, it's not my responsibility to keep paying for your rent or whatever I was paying for. So I started to stand up for myself. So there was a little bit of a, maybe a martyr that came in at that point, that like I was still doing it, but like I had some sort of thing like, well, you have to do this in order to change this. But really, I wasn't changing at all. Still, I was still just moving the behavior from one, I don't know, maybe category to another, like it was shifting from physical to money to this to that to this. Yeah.
And do you have any other examples of payback in your life with regards to like food or alcohol or maybe even travel? I know we've both traveled, and as much as there's such a wonderful part to traveling, were you really escaping from?
Yeah, I think, I mean, a lot of people ask me about like, why have I lived away from Australia for so long and things like that. And is it, you know, was I kind of getting away from my family in a way? And I think that that definitely has been a part of this, in a sense that I didn't have to, maybe, I don't know, deal with all the family stuff, because if I lived away from home, then I sort of extracted myself from all of that interactions. And I think that definitely has, I'm not going to say caught up with me, but that I had to look at that too. If we go back to what I was avoiding within, the relationship stuff, I definitely think they're avoiding kind of getting deeper in the relationships I have with my parents, and why I feel that way, and the truth about what I feel and they feel, and having some real talk there. So I definitely think that was something that was, you know, subliminally being avoided, albeit, um it's interesting because even as I think about it now, I'm curious if part of the avoidance was because I was scared maybe that I wouldn't get from them what I needed or wanted. And especially as I think about my mum, her and I have reconciled and I use the word reconciled in a more global sense than a sort of specific item, but I think, just being able to communicate and see each other,
Mhm.
and through that we've now kind of found the relationship and connected in a way that I always dreamed of that I didn't have as a child. But it took the work within myself and herself separately, and then coming together to actually do that, to be able to bring it to that place, which I definitely think that I was, maybe I was avoiding or putting a wedge in there because I was scared that maybe it wouldn't ever come to that. And therefore I would be living in that place where it would feel empty again because I didn't get the connection I was looking for. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
That does make sense. And I've heard that famous saying, are you running away from your problems? Like, why
Mhm.
don't you just stay here and deal with them?
Yes.
Um, the flip side of that is that, when you're perceived to be running away, you create space,
Hmm.
and you create the opportunity for those people to see you in a different manner
Mm.
because you have been away.
Yeah.
And then the whole other journey of you being alone as a
Yes.
person navigating a new environment and creating a new family that
Mm.
you never would have experienced had you actually stayed with your own family.
Yeah.
So for everyone who's kind of saying, "Oh, you're just running away and you're escaping," it's like, well, there's a flip side to it. It's not it's not as easy as you're painting it out to be.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah. Yes. And something that came to me then is actually, I think, especially when I think about my mother and I, like, I think we both needed to see ourselves first before we could then see each other. And only through that distance and the work, became that space so that we could really see who we were to be able to then come back together, which, is really,
mm,
incredible, and especially the most fulfilling thing that I've ever done in terms of all of the work, that it beats out, a relationship or a job or anything, to be connected with my mother in a way that I've always dreamed is something that, I almost felt like that's something that nobody ever really has because it's just a lie or it's just made up. Nobody is close to their mother, you know,
mm,
or maybe that's
okay.
the story I told myself to kind of get through.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the payoff to the story. So if so, the payoff to the story about your mother. What was that all about? Like you could never have that relationship.
I think I'm curious if it's because it wasn't happening. The payoff was, well, it's not meant to happen. Therefore, don't be disappointed that it's not happening. I don't know if it was as simple as that.
Okay.
Um, and maybe there's a little bit of well, nobody understands me, maybe it's a little bit martyrish of nobody understands me, so I'm not going to be bothered by it or whatever, and like I'm just the black sheep, or the one that's difficult, or whatever. You could probably put all of those in there. um
Special.
yeah,
Special
definitely.
unique, like yeah.
Yeah, and therefore I you know that's just what happens when you're that person. You don't get those things or something.
Right. Okay. So your story is if you're that person, you don't get those things, which means that a lot of things available to everybody in life might not be available to you.
Wow, I'm having a real moment. Yeah.
So
I actually just, like, what flashed for me was the other parts of my life. I think, one of the things I've been we haven't talked about sort of I mean, there's so many subjects that we can go down this in terms of awareness and consciousness. And maybe I don't know if they're all spirituality tools or tools, there's human design, there's astrology, there's, you know, hypnotherapy, like there's anything and everything that brings you to a more state of awareness about yourself.
yeah.
And one of the things in my human design is the gate that talks about being sort of like the genius or the freak. And I think I've always felt, maybe even going back to those relationships with those guys, because I was so different, or and certainly in school, I was so different and so like on another planet with how I thought. And you talked about being, fast talker, fast learner. Like I was so ahead of things that it was really uncomfortable to even understand like how to slow myself down, and therefore just felt like, well, I guess because I'm this, then I'm just going to have this life where I'm never understood, and no one would ever want to be with someone like me because of this, because of that. So that moment just connected a whole bunch of dots, because I was like, fuck, um maybe that's why I'm where I'm at, single and work and life and everything, because I have this thing, and therefore that is never going to be able to attract someone that would be okay with that type of person.
Right. So there's the experience of time. I just want to go back to the last line that you said,
Yeah.
which was, it's never going to attract a type of person. If you could like change that belief,
Yes. Thank
what
you.
would it be? What would it be?
Thank you for catching me. I would say that uh, I'm really excited to meet the people that are attracted to someone like me, who thinks differently and is willing to be seen in the world, not like everyone else, unique and different.
Yeah, nice, nice.
Little
And we're
live
all looking
moment,
for each other,
my
so
brain just like all things changing. Wow, that was beautiful. Very well caught. Thank you.
um, my pleasure.
Yeah.
So how do you know when there's a payback in your life?
I think for me, it was that the loop kept coming around. That if I was learning the lesson over and over and over, and
I'm not learning, not learning the lesson over and over.
yeah, I think, exactly, like not catch, because I don't think you were learning it, or you weren't learning it because it's still coming, and it's not until you learn it that you realize you weren't learning it. Um, which is so like sounds difficult but very simple. But yes, absolutely. I think for me, anything that, as I became aware, I started to see that this was a repeat in some shape or form. And I actually, that's kind of flashing back in a sense that I've been writing lately a story about when I went to Hawaii with my mother for Christmas. And I think it's such an incredible story, because it's so me and so her, but so profound in a sense. Like I didn't realize until afterwards actually how much of a difference it made in her life, and how it kind of really broke the straw for us, the camel's back for us. So we were in Hawaii, and we've had a bunch of trips around the world together in different things, and it was sort of like every one of those trips became, we were talked about it's going to be great and it's going to be different. And then we would get there and we would have the same dramas and we would fight, and it end up being really shitty. And so this time we were like, both of us, like, we'd both done a lot of work on ourselves, and we were like, it really wasn't, we weren't going to have the same thing. Anyway, Christmas Day, it kind of blew up, and we ended up starting to go down the same direction as it had been. And I just remember saying to Mum, it's not that deep, and I wasn't laughing, but there was a part of it that the kind of tantrum, sort of element, Mum was, really almost out of bodily acting in this kind of way. And I was like, you don't need to go there. Anyway, the next day I had this idea that, that I saw on a movie, Honey Boy, and when the therapist sends the young version of Shia LaBeouf into the forest and says, just like scream really loudly, and then it shifts things inside of you and just go wild in the forest. So I said to my mum, like, I've got this idea, and I drove to what I thought was going to be, like a forest in the middle of nowhere. Ended up being a cliff in a really highly populated sort of beach sort of space. So I said to her, I'm going to go to the edge of the cliff and just scream off the edge of it. And would you do it with me? And she was like, no. And I was like, okay. So I was like, I can't not do it. So I did it. I literally went off and I screamed and I screamed. And it was probably 10 or 15 minutes. And there was these kayakers down the bottom that literally were like, it's okay, don't jump. And I just remember, like, there was a part of me, I was like, what would it look like if I jumped? It was really interesting. I kept screaming and screaming. Nothing came, like no tears, no nothing. I literally, my voice was hoarse. And I remember sitting down to my mum, and she said to me the other day that I said something like, maybe it's because I felt abandoned. You know, maybe I abandoned myself. Maybe I abandoned you, talking about kind of running away and going
Yeah.
to another country. And so we kind of had this moment, and then a few things shifted, and we ended up like finding some peace, and something sort of broke. And it was a few months later that my mum said to me, it was that day that she saw that it was so like that it had, the pain and the suffering had driven me to a place that that was where all I could go, and the screaming on the edge of the cliff, and how that's where she had seen that she wanted things to be different. And how then that's really what was the turning moment for her, but she didn't share that until quite some months later. So as I think about how to tie this up, how I saw what flashed back to me is that we kept going on these trips and we kept having the same experience.
Okay.
And so that clearly for me, you know, just repeating what we've just said here, is where there was a payoff. There was something we were both getting out of, like it not fixing or it not getting better. And it's really interesting that the screaming on the edge of the cliff was almost as you know, I don't know if it was um like seeing the other perspective, like the other side of it or something. Like she was able to see the other side of me and I was able to see the other side of her or something. And that's what really broke that pattern for us actually both to be able to stop that payoff and move forward. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. So would you say that she had a certain fixed view of you based on everything that you told her, and
Yeah.
she never could have imagined that there was that level of rawness and frustration to be expressed about the situation?
Yeah, possibly. I'd love to ask her about that, but that feels like it's in the range of, you know, without speaking for her. But yeah, I think it was almost like she had no concept that it was so deep that it would drive me to do that.
Yeah. So there's something around when, as an adult, do you show vulnerability to your parents?
Mm.
Because I know that, like, my parents will kind of go, well, don't you think about this? Don't you think about that? Like, why don't you do this? And I kind of go, do you not think I've thought all about all of this? Like, do you think I'm willingly choosing to do these certain things? And it's not until they see vulnerability and
Wow.
frustration that they kind of go, oh, okay, I think that they just have this view of me being tunnel vision, strong minded, and clearly somewhere along the line they think I've made a certain set of decisions. And I'm like, well, like, life presents you with a landscape,
Yeah.
and you do what you can with the landscape unless
Yeah.
you change the situation that you're in. So
Yes.
there's the element of showing up as vulnerable, which is what we didn't do in our family.
Right. Yeah. Certainly weren't taught that.
No, not at all. It was like, what are you crying? I'm like, somebody just died, and they're like, it's a part of life. Just get on with it. And you're like,
Okay. Good to know. Thanks for that heads up. Yeah.
yeah. Which maybe as an adult you can understand, but as a child, like
Right.
it's a
Yeah.
concept you don't understand.
Yes. And also, you know, if we look at a, even, you know, jumping ahead in some sense of like how we want to raise our own children and how we want to change the patterns of our past, is like, you know, I think there's an element of like buck up that's great in some environments, but you know, buck up without expressing your feelings and understanding you're able to, and it's okay to, versus having to push them down, which, you know, then brings us to being 40 years old and not being able to deal with our emotions and all the rest of it, which,
Crying in yoga.
yes, exactly. Back to square one. Yeah, wow, what a beautiful circle. Thank you for that. I think I think it's really interesting too, as we talk about vulnerability, like what that is for different people. You know, like that did not feel like a vulnerable act to me if I think about all the things that I have done, and you've seen me over the last couple of years, you know, really
Mm,
step into very different parts of myself. But I can see how um you know, that deep sort of um rawness could be seen as that way, and then, you know, really sort of triggering in a good way to kind of shift the narrative of what maybe she understood me to be, or how I was, or, you know,
Yeah.
how I was dealing with it, or okay with it or not.
Yeah. Because could you imagine if you were there with your mother as one of the other people and you saw a mother-daughter come along and a daughter just goes to the edge of the cliff and just like viscerally screams for 15 minutes. And, you know, there's something about feeling a feeling without any thought, but to let out that, you know, imagine an animal just like wailing that pain.
Oh,
I'm imagining that that's what it was like. Like, do you know what I mean? Like if you had have witnessed somebody else doing that, what what story would you have given it?
yeah, fuck. Excuse my French. Yeah. Yeah, far out. I think yeah, you know, it's fascinating because, like, whilst in one sense I felt like it was just an exercise that I was doing from like my acting classes and my acting work,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
I'm just having this sort of massive reflection of just like how on a um deeply intrinsic mother daughter human, like, came out of your womb connection that would be to hear that. Whereas for me, I was just like, why is it not working? This is not working. It's not working. There's no tears. Like, you know, I wasn't laughing, but I was definitely, I certainly wasn't laughing, but I was
Hmm.
maybe amused at how I couldn't get something to shift, you know,
Okay.
in acting classes or whatever we do it. And, you know, you laughing and crying are the same vibrations in your stomach. So, you know, sometimes if you're trying to get into tears, you'll be like, ha, 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 and then eventually it'll turn into tears. So there's ways to, like, you know, emotional mastery, which I think might be our next subject to talk about, you know, to work yourself into things, but like nothing was shifting. So I was just like, this is dumb. So I just kept going and
Okay.
going and
Oh, wow.
going.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, no tears,
Wow.
nothing. It was like dead, and I just kept going and screaming and screaming and screaming, and then I just sat down. I was like, well, so yeah, wow, what an amazing kind of gift. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
So just what tips would you give? What other tips would you give to somebody about identifying the payback or the payoff?
Yeah, I
It's
love it.
the payoff.
I think you know, everything starts with awareness. I mean, like, we can't even overstate, understate, like, exaggerate, like, flash it in your face. Like, the concept of awareness is the answer to everything. What does that even mean? That just means noticing. That means being curious. That means being open. That means being vulnerable. That means being truthful.
Yeah.
All of those things. And when you get a delicious, you know, mix of that, that's again where the going back to the very beginning, the comedy starts to be like, oh, this is kind of funny. So, like, every time I do this happens, you know, or every time I get off the phone with this person, I feel this feeling in my body. So I think starting to notice, like, you know, I live in a what I believe to be an sort of a you know, ongoing conscious state, that every part of my day I am aware of what I eat, I drink, I say, I do, I think. And whilst there are sort of some sort of patterns or behavior, you know, like beliefs, things running through, you know, some programming that runs through that still brings things up, you know, I think it would be just start in one day, just, you know, today, right now, get off this call and you finish listening to us and you're like, okay, cool, so I'm going to go get something to eat, and you're like, what am I reaching for?
Okay.
Maybe, I mean, I'm just make like I make everything up, and it's really, that I think is the beauty about spirituality and consciousness. It's like making up your path based on your instincts, but looking at everything you do with an awareness and an open heart and open mind. So what am I reaching for? What am I
Okay.
saying to
Like
myself?
a croissant, a croissant versus cauliflower.
Exactly. And what am I saying to myself when I reach for this?
Mhm.
Because I think it's like an onion, and you just peel the layer back. How do I feel when I say that? How do I feel when I eat that? How do I, what do I reflect on? You might get flashbacks and visions or something of like last time you ate 6 cronuts and you ended up in the toilet and you were like, I'm never going to be here before. But then for some reason you're on cronut number 3 and you haven't noticed. Like,
Mm.
I think it's just like that. Almost, I feel like I have become childlike in how I go through my day. You wake up and you're like, what am I feeling? And what do I want to do? And And I think, when you start to play that sort of thing, it then starts to show up to you. And I think we talked about anything that comes around second, third time, it's going to start like banging pretty hard. And then, like when you got your head in the toilet and you're like, okay, this is the third time this week. Like, okay, maybe I really need to look at this.
Yeah, definitely. It's I guess there's the willingness to change.
Yes.
I kind of, I've been getting some friends to read some articles with the hope of trying to open their eyes
Right.
in terms of how they can apply different things to their life.
Yeah.
And I think they all kind of go, oh, that's interesting. But if they're not open and willing to change, like,
Yeah. You can't lead a
there's
horse to water. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I, and I'm not sure if I cut you off then. Do you want to finish?
it was just, and the minute that you have that willingness and you're kind of like just looking for, maybe just even asking yourself, if there was a payback for this, what would it be?
Yeah.
Like, and some of it might be, oh, nobody's messaged me. I have no friends. Like, poor me, I'm isolated. Like there's a certain, martyr story that goes on with that, as opposed to, well, when was the last time you actually reached out to everybody?
Yes.
And I think especially in these times where people are spending more time by themselves, it's really important to, not do the whole tennis ball thing sometimes where you wait for somebody else to reply to you, but generally just, send around a messages to everyone just to check in.
Yeah. Yes. I think, as you peel back, that's great. The next layer to, why am I reaching for this cronut? And then it's
Yeah.
like, okay, because nobody gives a shit what I look like anyway, and I'm, fat already, or, I'm being a bit, blunt here, but or um
Or I'm not going to go outside, so it doesn't matter. Like,
yeah,
I'm not going to, this whole thing of I'm not going outside, I'm not really socializing, so it doesn't really matter what I look like. So I can let myself, I can kind of go
yeah,
at ease
yeah,
a little bit.
yeah, yeah. I think too, as we think about productivity and what people are using their time, you know using their time for, or how they spend their day, certainly as ones that have more time available because maybe their job isn't in the same place where they were. So what does that look like? Well, you know I don't think it's as much as like everyone's in a pandemic, so therefore I can just lay around and watch Netflix day after day. It's more of like, maybe I need rest in this moment. So, I think it's such an interwoven thing. And, the payoff might be that, well, I wasn't going to make it in my career anyway. So, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm just going to do nothing. Or, I wanted to write that movie script, but like, I'm never going to make it and nobody's going to want anything I write. So, it could be that, or, I think it's looking at every individual behavior and then, maybe looking at, like a very brave and honest inventory of why or why not are you feeling that way. I think it's just maybe I don't know if that's simple, but it feels like if you just take away all the extra stuff and also do it in the privacy of your own environment, then it's it's really quite simple. Like what do I feel like I'm getting? So go back and repeat those categories for us. So just as we summarize up for today, maybe as someone's like doing that inventory, they can be like, all right, I've got 4 stickies on the wall. What are they again? And what might I be or not be?
Yes. So the 4 ways to belong are: you're the carer,
Mm-hmm.
you're the sick one, you're the brilliant one, or you're the difficult one.
Okay.
So they're the four ways to belong, and they're going to drive your behavior. And if you look at the behavior, let's just say you're sick and it gets your attention, you may be, taking the sniffles and blowing it out, and it's full blown, like, oh my gosh, I can't get out of bed, somebody come and help me,
Mhm,
because that's the only way that you learn how to get attention.
mhm,
And then maybe during these times you're finding that you're not getting that same amount of attention, so you become more dramatic in your in,
mm,
in the illnesses that you're getting. So there's normally always some sort of, like, ask yourself, what is the gain that I'm getting from this?
mhm,
And if we go back to that example where the lady was keeping herself single because she was getting back at the parents for not playing as a child, it's like, who am I getting revenge on
right.
by being in this situation?
Yes. Like,
So the,
almost, who do you feel like you can be like, well, it's their fault, or, they don't something anyway. There's somebody, like, maybe subliminally, that you are kind of sticking it to by doing that.
yeah,
Yeah. Interesting.
yeah.
Damn.
So
Okay.
like if you had, yeah, so let's just say you had an ex and you were being very difficult about a divorce settlement, like there's definitely like a pay off there somewhere, knowing that you'll get some sort of satisfaction that,
Mhm. Or that'll
um,
make it tougher for him, or that'll make it, yeah, uncomfortable for him.
right.
Yeah.
As
Wowzers.
opposed to just moving on with your life, and making a clean, even break and moving on with your life. Like there's
Right.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Inventory on oneself. And I mean, let's just be real too. Like, this stuff is not easy. And like, I'm having my own moments here of just reflecting on some of the stuff that we've talked about. And whilst I think the the importance of being gentle with yourself, and the importance of being back to the comical side, it's not like you laugh it off and you'd be like, haha, I'm not really, la da da. It's more of like, okay, cool, I did that. And like, now that I see it, the
Yeah.
truth really is incredible medicine. Once we are truthful with ourselves, everything shifts, and it doesn't hold the power over you anymore. And I think, I feel lighter just for having that conversation around,
Yeah.
knowing that, seeing the patterns of what we do and how we are is so incredible, to then like release it and kind of be the people that we've always wanted to be.
Exactly. And I think sometimes when you release something that's so deep, it can take a while to integrate in your life. And
Yes.
I know that there are some people who are like doing 5 different therapies, like twice
Mhm.
a week, and and then they're in this like washing machine of
Mhm.
emotions and instability, and what I'm going to call maybe slight anxiety. And
Yes.
then they kind of go, well, why aren't I getting better? It's sometimes you just need to let things settle. So
Yeah.
once you've done a whole bunch of work, let things settle, see what then comes up as the next thing to address.
Yeah.
So there is an element of, going easy on yourself, and maybe you do need to get to the stage of where you let it settle, and then you can have a bit of a laugh about it,
Yeah.
then move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Wow. I just had a flashback too. I think there was a point after the breakup for me where I went so hard into therapy and self-help and self-discovery and self-fixing,
Yeah.
because the payoff for me was like, well, I'm going to stick it to you that I'm not um a bad person, and I'm smarter than that, and I didn't, like, I didn't allow myself to be taken advantage of, and I'm never going to let that happen again, and you'll now see that I'm really good at what I'm doing, and all of these things. So there was definitely a moment where I had to sort of like step back from it all, and just be, and not kind of feel like I was going every day somewhere to fix myself, because I'd done such a bad job, and I was so um and I'm using this word because it's how I felt at the time, but I was so appalled with how I'd behaved, that I'd got myself into that situation, that I was like so desperate to do anything I could to fix it. When
Mm,
really I just needed to be gentle and realize that, this was a gift given to me to actually finally find some freedom.
yeah.
and, you know, actually work out who I was and believe in the value of who I am.
Hmm. And when you look back on life, were there other ways for you to learn that lesson, like in a kinder, gentler way, or does it always have to be through crisis?
I mean, I think my older narrator is saying, of course, there's always ways that we can go around it. I can also see there were like some hits upside the head that were smaller along the way that if I had listened to those, I wouldn't have got to that level of crisis. But
Yeah.
yes, I think, you know, and maybe that's why I feel like sharing these videos and sharing these conversations and all of the other work that we're both doing in our different worlds, whether it be through, you know, actual healing modalities or um, discussion or art or film or any sort of like expression of our learnings, because I don't think it needs to be crisis in everything. And I think, you know, part of what I think I would say the biggest takeaway for me out of what I went through in my breakdown around the relationship side of things was how driven now I feel that I would like to get to the education of children
Okay.
so that we can inform them, educate them to learn about themselves and to learn about these types of behaviors and these types of payoffs and all of like every sort of, you know, thing, again, astrology, numerology, you know, attachment there cycles, you know, just any type of sort of like psychological understanding, metaphysical, however you, so that they don't get to 40 years old and have a breakdown. Like it's just unnecessary. And, you know, giving kids, the future generations, tools to be able to communicate and connect and to converse and to process and to integrate and to be aware will, you know, not only shift the planet, but, you know, be a nicer place for us all to live, you know. So
Exactly. Woo.
that's me. That's my greater purpose. Just an average day in the life of Toni Short. But you know, I think that we can do that, and I think that's what we're doing by at least talking about this stuff too. Because I think there's, you know, there's a lot of freedom to realize actually we're all not alone, and we're going through a lot of this stuff together. But we often, I think, as children too, we feel like we're alone in going through all of this. So therefore, there's never any kind of bigger understanding that actually this is a thing, and then we can stop ourselves from going through this thing by doing certain things, and, you know, kind of change the directory of our life.
Yeah.
Trajectory, not directory.
I was thinking about that this morning. Like, nobody ever sat me down as a child and said, you have this internal voice
Yes.
and this is what it should sound like.
Yeah.
Because I distinctly remember kind of going, I wonder if everyone else has a voice in their head. And, and is it as negative as mine? And I'm just like, oh, and then, you know, I think one day I may have kind of asked someone in like,
Yeah, and they were like, what are you talking about?
I was like, you know, this voice in your head that just kind of doesn't shut up, telling you to do better. Like, you should have done this, you should have done that.
Did you have that language though when you were a kid? Like, did you know it was negative? Like, or was it just like, is there someone in my head? Or like, how did you even think about it? Because I don't know if I was cognizant of that as a kid.
I'm going to say maybe around like early teenage years, I was like, is everyone else going, like, does this happen to everyone else? Like,
Right,
maybe it was like somewhere between 10 to 13 or something.
right.
Um, but what I do know is that it was never something that was really discussed.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then I think now that maybe there's such a, you know, there's an increasing prevalence of, you know, depression and suicide, that maybe people are starting to cotton on that kids at a young age do, you know, tend to have these thoughts that are not good for them.
Yes.
So,
And actually have no idea, A, that they can change those thoughts, or B, that
yeah.
those thoughts are just thoughts and not their true knowing or whatever. You know, there's many layers. We could jump into that as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, another amazing week of like deep live therapy going on. Thank you so much for you know,
For
for
watching it.
Yeah. Yeah, for being a gentle pair of hands, and safe hands for me to share, and likewise for yourself. It was nice to be able to reciprocate, and yeah, thank you so much for all your knowledge and your information and your friendship and your love and your expansion. You're absolutely an expander in my life, so thank you.
Likewise. It's nice to have somebody I can tag team with.
Yes.
So that, yeah, it's been one of the biggest things about our relationship. It's like when one of us we pull each other up,
Yes. Yeah,
which is amazing.
it is. Great. Well, I'll see you next week. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for coming. It was really beautiful to spend this time with you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll see you next week. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.